All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So today we're going to be looking at the rebirth of education. Because remember, I was telling you guys that in the Dark Ages, education for the serfs, the peasant people, was basically none. And then we're going to be looking at the second half of the lesson is going to be, excuse me, sorry about that, is going to be about Martin Luther and his 95 Thesis. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the objective today. So we're going to conclude if Martin Luther was right about his 95 Thesis. Okay, then we're going to analyze the impact of Dante's book that it had on the people of Europe. And then lastly, we're going to critique whether or which is the quickest way to spread information. Is it by print or is it by word of mouth? Now, the thing is, we're going to look at the accuracy as well. You know, which way is faster and as well as more accurate. Okay. All right. So now we come to the warm-up picture. So, excuse me about that. The first question I have for you is to basically analyze the picture and for you to tell me, in a sense, what is going on in this picture. What is going on? There is a lot of stuff. If you look at the background, the foreground, the sides, um, there's a lot going on there. So analyze it. What's going on? Okay. And then the second question asks you to depict what is this, or predict what is this artist um, trying to say? What are they depicting? You know, depict means to show. What are they trying to show? You know, so make a prediction. What do you think? What is this artist trying to say, or what are they trying to depict? What are they trying to show? Okay, so take a minute or two, however much time you need. Pause the video because we're moving on to the notes in three, two, one. All right, so like I told you guys, back in the Dark Ages, the peasants, the serfs, they weren't given much of an education, basically none at all. They were basically taught to just how to work the field, and that was it. All right, how to do their jobs, that was it. Okay, but the thing is now because of the Renaissance, education started to make a comeback. And since there was not really much that was discovered or created during the Dark Ages, ergo that's why they kind of call it the Dark Ages, they had to look back to the Greeks and Romans and look back at what they did. Look at their work, their literature, their philosophy, their poetry, their history. And they learned from that. Okay. Now, the thing is, this Renaissance basically set up the humanism movement, which is again the study of all these subjects. But also, they had to look at these manuscripts that were written in Latin. So Latin started making a comeback. The language of Latin really started making a comeback. Now, here's the thing: believe it or not, if you like speak Spanish or you understand Spanish, you have a closer understanding of what Latin is. Okay, so let me move my video thing over here. So, um, like if you speak Spanish and you know the word siempre means always. If you look at the bottom one, the one closest to the notes, the little section that says in Latin, semper paratus means always prepared. Always, siempre, always. See how Spanish and Latin, it kind of sounds the same, right? And that's the thing. A lot of the romantic languages, French, Spanish, Italian, they have the Latin roots to it. So when you see Latin, you can kind of like, oh, okay, I see what that says. That did. So like carpe diem, dia, you know, day, diem. See, carpe diem seize the day. Yeah. Now, some of these words again, they amor, love. Same thing with in Italian too, in French, amor, love. Okay, so if you're ever interested in that kind of stuff, look that up. Look it on Google. Look how Latin and Spanish words are connected, or French, or Italian, and you'll see that there's a connection. Okay. All right. So again, like I told you, the rebirth of education happened during the Renaissance. Now, I want to know from what you personally believe. I'm not looking for the, you know, PC right answer from you guys. I don't want you guys all putting, oh, history is the most important subject because it's so good. Tell me what you really think. If you really feel history is the most important subject, then explain why. If you feel English is, explain why. If you think science or math, by all means, tell me why. Okay, you're not being graded on. Well, they didn't say history, so I'm going to mark them all wrong. I'm not going to do that. I just want to know what you believe to be the most important subject of the four major ones, and why. Okay, why do you feel that that subject you chose is more important than the other ones? Okay, so take a minute, think about it. Okay, but we're moving on in three. Well, be sure you pause the video. But we're moving on in three, two, one. All right, so vernacular. This is a language that is spoken in certain regions. Okay, yes, they can be spoken other words, but the origins can be traced back to this one area. It's like the population there really speaks that language, and not really much else. Okay, so places like Italy, they speak Italian. France, they speak French. German, they speak German in Germany. See now English, and it's kind of harder because the thing is it didn't origin from the United States, so it's hard to say that here in the United States it would be that. In England, yeah, it's England English. Same thing with like Mexico and Spanish. It didn't it didn't start from that area. They actually came from Spain, you know. But so Spain, the Spanish language, it's in so many different countries, Dominican, Cuba, Mexico, Colombia, Guatemala, things like that. Their primary language is Spanish, but it didn't come from there. So that's why I didn't put those on there. Okay. Now, there was two authors who made vernacular literature very popular. One is Dante, and the other one is Chaucer. Now, Dante wrote this book called The Divine Comedy, which is this book right here. This book right here scared the crap out of people back in the day. All right. This book talks about how he goes on a journey. You know, he had a dream that an angel came to him and took him on a journey through hell, purgatory, and heaven. And as you can see, some of these illustrations are absolutely beautiful. No one really can see that. They're absolutely beautiful. And this, believe it or not, is one long poem. It's a huge long poem. It's very hard to read, um, but it's good. And if you read it, you can understand why it scared the crap out of people. Because each sin, there's seven major sins. Each one of them, you're tormented in a certain way. Um, like I think it was lust. I believe it was um you the people couldn't like grab onto things. They were swept up by their lust, their love for something, in life, whether it's physical or just whatever. They couldn't hold on in hell. They couldn't hold on to anything, so they were constantly swirling around. That's their punishment, is to eternally be swished around, and there's no you know consistency. They're just always, and so these he would see like souls like grabbing for rocks or parts of mountain, trying to grab something to hold on to just for a moment of stillness. And no, I believe, if I remember right, anger was the one where they're on a boat and people are trying to come out of the water, things like that, and they keep sinking, and it's because their anger, their rage held them down in the water, and they're constantly trying to get out of the water, trying to constantly get out. and they can't because again their anger that they had, their rage they had in life kept bringing them down. All right. So again, there's the seven sins: gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, pride, lust, envy. Okay. The other book, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, which I actually do have, but I forgot to bring it out. Um, it's the story of these 29 people, and they're basically going to go see this tomb of Saint Thomas of Becket. Sorry about that. But the thing is, they're telling their tales, things they went through, stuff like that, how they got to this journey, and it's actually a very good book. It actually wasn't finished. Chaucer was constantly writing on it, and he died before he finished. But there's people who studied him, things like that, they were able to finish it. Okay, so these two books really changed the landscape, especially the Divine Comedy. It really scared people straight. It made them go into a more pure life because, I mean, if you have an imagination, this book really does a good job. I mean, it really gives detail, and like I said, the reason why it's hard is one, it's a poem, and two, the language. You have to remember this is made like in the 12th century, so the language is pretty hard. But if you can get through it, it's amazing. Okay. All right. So here's my question: why do you think the Divine Comedy book? Why did this book? It's a book. Why did this book convince so many people to live a more pure life? Okay, remember what's about, you know, and why would that convince people? Why would that really make people start like, maybe I should live a better life. Maybe I should stop doing all this stuff and it's actually, you know, live better. Because again, you have to remember too, the Greeks and Romans they taught moderation. Yeah, you can do some things, but do it in moderation. Do it very little. Don't overexcess like playing video games. Sure, maybe an hour, but nothing more than that. And that includes your Xbox, PlayStation, your phone, tablets, all any type of games. They're like, yeah, do it for an hour, but don't do any more than that because that's being too much. That's being excessive, And that's where a lot of people are realizing, like, man, when it comes to like eating, I'm eating a lot more than I should. When it comes to anger, man, I'm angry a lot more than I should be. So that's what they're talking about in the book. Yeah, it's okay to be angry here and there, but to be too angry, to be holding a grudge and, things like that, yeah, that's not good. Okay. So continue writing if you haven't finished yet, but we're going to move on in three, two, one. All right. So we're going to talk about Martin Luther. Uh, this guy, Martin Luther, he was a creator of the Protestant Reformation movement. Okay, basically, Martin Luther was this priest who was very upset with the church, and you're going to see why. Okay, so the Catholic Church gave this guy, Johann Tetzel, complete authority in England. Basically, they told him, hey, dude, whatever you do, you have our blessing. And they're basically telling the people, whatever he says, it's basically coming from the Pope. Now, to the Catholics, that's like, oh man, because the Pope is the head of the church. He's supposed to be the interpreter of God's word, things like that. Whatever when he says something, it's supposed to be taken like, okay, this is what God meant. This is God's interpretation. So here's this guy basically being a second voice for the Pope, and then what he does is he goes, all right, we need to collect money to build St. Peter Basilica in Rome. St. Peter Basilica is a beautiful entrance area. It's has statues and things like that. It's very beautiful. And he's like, we need money to build it. But how do we build it? Okay, well, in churches, they take collections and things like that from people. And what happens is he's looking at the money they're getting. Is like, this is not enough. This is barely enough to hold you guys going. Pay for your food, pay for the wine, pay for a lot of stuff. You know, so yeah, no. So what he comes up with a plan, and he basically told people, "Hey, listen up, England. If you give us money, you know, let's say you give us like $500, basically your relatives will be able to get out of purgatory and go to heaven." Okay, because remember, like the book, the Dante's the Divine Comedy. There's hell, purgatory, heaven. He's saying your family members that are here in purgatory, they'll be able to go to heaven. Instead of you praying, constantly praying for their soul, things like that, constantly praying for them. He's like, no. If you pay us $500 or whatever the amount was back then, they can get out of purgatory and go to heaven. So imagine people like having their grandma, grandpa, maybe their little baby son, daughter, or whoever, who wasn't baptized, they would be in purgatory and stuff like that. Somebody who didn't get their last rites, they could be like in purgatory or even hell. And he's like, if you give money, their soul will climb up. Now, this upset Martin Luther. He's like, how can you say that to people? That's not how it works. That's not how our faith works. You don't just pay and all of a sudden, there they go. You know, that basically tells the poor people, oh, your family, are going to stay where they are because you can't pay, because you're poor. So, to you. So, Martin Luther wrote this thesis. He wrote 95 things that was wrong with the Catholic Church. Them paying for the souls to go to heaven, that's one of them, right? And what he did is he got this paper and nailed it to the church door. Nailed it, as you see from the picture here. And people were reading it like, yeah, um, that's true. That is true. All right, so here's the thing though. Uh, a little before this time, the printing press was invented in Europe by Johannes Gutenberg. I love that name, by the way. Johannes Gutenberg. So what he did is he invented the printing press, which made it a lot easier to print things out. Because here's the thing: back in the day, books like this, they had to be done by hand. All the artwork, everything. So each book was unique. Because again, you can't write the same exact way, you know, on a whole book the same way. Your lines are gonna be a little bit more longer in this one. Your pictures are gonna be a little bit different. The color might be a little bit off because you ran out of ink, and so that's why books were really expensive back in the day. But because of the printing press, because they can move little tiles and put ink on there, and then there you go. It was a lot easier to make copies of stuff. So Martin Luther's 95 Thesis was one of those documents that they set up the tiles, they put the ink on, and boom. And they're like, okay, well, how many can we make? As many as you want. How many do you want? So they start printing them up everywhere and start putting them around and spreading around England, trying to let people know, like, hey, don't you see this? Do you not realize this is happening? This is coming from somebody who's a priest in the church and saying this stuff. You know, so the word of mouth, yeah, it's good, it's fine, but when people can read it for themselves, it's a lot easier to get the information to them, for them to see themselves. Okay? And that's one of the beauties of the printing press at this time, especially. It no longer has to be worried about people were trying to remember, like, oh yeah, did someone say something like that? Yeah. You know, it's right there, and then you can read it yourself. So what happens is the church basically formulates this thing called the Edict of Worm, which basically said that anyone who helps Martin Luther, whether it's giving him somewhere to stay, giving him something to eat, helping him in any which way, um, they're going to get punished. And then all his work, all his stuff was going to be destroyed. Okay. Um, And the thing is that the Edict of Worms also stipulated that Martin Luther should be captured. He should not only not be helped, he should, if you see him, get him, because he's a heretic. A heretic is someone who says things against God. So again, because the church doesn't like what he's saying, they're like, oh, well, you, he's going against God. You can't go against God. You're basically calling God a liar. So get him, you know. Um, so he's on the run. Okay. Now, the thing is, the diet of worms in 1521 was a critical movement. It started getting people realizing, like, you know what? Maybe this guy has a point. Look how the church is going about this. The guy is basically stating some things that we all know are true, and look how they're reacting. Get him, arrest him, find him. You help him, you're gonna get punished. You're gonna get in trouble. That's not very Christian-like thing to do. So, but the thing is, Martin Luther was under the protection of this ruler named King Frederick, and King Frederick was, in a sense, not really afraid of the church, because they were like, they knew he was there. They're like, give unto us. And he's like, no, no. So he kept Martin Luther hidden and protected from the church. And while all this is going on, the Protestant movement is spreading. So while the church is focused on capturing Martin Luther, thinking if they capture him, that this will end the Protestant movement, it's not. It's actually making things worse for the church. They're making themselves look like the villains while they're trying to capture this guy who's basically speaking some truth about what the church is doing. All right, so here's my question to you. Do you think Martin Luther's 95 Theses was a good thing to do or a bad thing to do, and why? Remember, he was a priest. He was an insider. He saw how things were, how they were working, what the plans were, and he basically did a whistleblowing. He basically told the people, hey, this is what's up. This is just wrong what they're doing, what they say and all this stuff. They can't guarantee that, So he's telling the people what's up from as an insider. He's inside the organization of the church, and he's telling people what's going on inside, how things are messed up and things like that. So, do you think that was a good thing he did, or a bad thing that he shouldn't have said stuff, and why? Why do you believe this? Okay, so go ahead, answer the question. Pause the video if you need time, but we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. So, lastly, um, here's your exit ticket. Remember, you're only going to pick one of these two questions. Would the word of Martin Luther have gotten as far without the printing press? Why or why not? Do you think people would have heard it more that way? Or do you think, hey, no matter what, people were going to be talking about it, the word was going to spread? Or do you think the printing press really was the thing that spread it? Okay, so what do you think? Give your answer, back it up with facts, justify it. Or the second question, we're talking about the vernaculars, right? Different areas learn the different language. So here's my question to you. Do you think it's important for neighboring countries to know each other's languages? Why or why not? So like here in the United States, down below in Mexico, they speak Spanish. And above us in Canada, they speak English, but they also speak like French. So would it be important for us, the United States, to be teaching French and Spanish in schools and things like that? Why or why not? Okay, think about other countries around the world too that are neighboring, like France. They have Spain, Portugal, English, Germany, I think Italy too, if I remember right. So they got several countries bordering them. Would it be wise for that country that they teach their people how to speak those languages? Okay, why or why not? So go ahead and answer the question. Again, that's the end of this lesson. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed some parts of it at the very least. Okay. So that's it. You guys take care and please be safe out there, all right? See you guys later.